Welcome to the Positive Thread podcast. I'm Heather McConaughey, registered nurse turned nutrition and mindset coach, podcast host, and inspirational speaker. I have a passion for empowering millennial women because, well, I'm the oldest of the millennials. Think of me like your big millennial sister, here to help you avoid all the mistakes that I made along the way and inspire you to dream big and achieve your goals. Every week, I'll bring you an interview, topic, or Q&A session that will inspire you to transform your body, mind, and soul so you can achieve your dreams and make a positive impact in the world. We believe that when women prioritize self-care, everyone wins. If that sounds good to you, you're in the right place. Are you ready? Let's start the show. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to share something really exciting with you. The way I've done my coaching program for the past 4 years is something called rolling enrollments, meaning if I have spots available and someone reaches out to me, they can start my program basically within a week or 2 weeks, and I'm always kind of taking on new clients. The way I'm going to be doing things moving forward is I'm going to have 3 launches of my program a year. I'm really excited to do things this way because it's going to create a lot of community and excitement and structure for you as you go through my coaching program. I'm also calling my coaching program Empower moving forward. Why empower? Well, I really distilled down that the thing that I do most for women is empower them with nutrition knowledge so they can take control of their bodies and move forward and live lives of confidence. Empower is going to be a 12-week coaching program that is in the summer, the fall, and the new year. Our next session is called Empower, the Summer Glow Up, and it starts June 7th. Applications are now open for the program. If you're a woman ages 20 to 40-ish and you've been thinking about working with me or you're curious to work with me, now is your time because the next opportunity to work with me as your coach in my one-to-one coaching program will not be until the fall. If you want to feel amazing this summer, get confidence, learn nutrition knowledge that you will have for life and glow yourself up, queen, then you need to go check out the page on my website. That's heathermcconaughey.com/empower. You will learn all about the program. You'll get to see if it's for you. You'll be able to apply and schedule an interview call with me. Now let's dive into the episode. Welcome to a brand new season of the Positive Thread podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Maybe it's your first time listening to this podcast, or maybe you've been a longtime fan and you are excited that we're back with some new episodes after a 4-month hiatus. I took some time off to just get settled again in my life. I moved to Austin. I got my apartment decorated. I got my life together again. And after a whirlwind couple of years of traveling and moving around, I finally am feeling settled and grounded again, which is amazing. So what we're going to do moving forward is do seasons of the podcast, anywhere from 8 to 12 episodes at a time, and they'll release every week for 2 to 3 months, and then I'll take a little break. And this honestly allows me to have better creativity. It allows me to come up with better content for y'all, feel more inspired. And there's just a lot to running a business. And I had to kind of just take a step back and realize that I needed to restructure things a little bit to be sustainable. I think it's so important that as women, we learn not to overdo things and overstretch ourselves. And this is a common theme that I see among the women who come to work with me as clients. Part of what drives poor eating is being overstretched in life. You have too much to do. You've committed to too many things. You're being pulled in too many directions. You've got work. You've got family. You've got friends. You've got a home to keep up. And you just can't do it all. And you're trying to be superwoman and something breaks. And the thing that we tend to let go of as women is our own self-care. We tend to let go of our healthy habits. It's easy to justify pushing off those things and instead prioritizing other people. The problem, though, is you will eventually have a nervous breakdown, or you will have a physical health crisis, or you will have a chronic health crisis. I see digestive issues in women. I see mental health issues in women. I see all kinds of issues like high blood pressure or diabetes develop or pre-diabetes. All of these come from committing to too much, being overstretched, and then not prioritizing your health and wellness. And this leads exactly into today's topic, which is talking about how to quit caffeine, part 2. I've done one episode on how to quit caffeine when I was successful for a period of time, and I strive to be fully authentic with all of you, and I will be the first to admit that I have not been abstinent from caffeine. I was going for coffee and caffeine, and it came out caffeine. I have not been abstinent from the caffeine since I recorded that episode. I have fallen back into coffee habits and then taken breaks and fallen back in. It's been a very difficult substance for me to quit. And I wanted to come back on here and share with you a little bit about the journey, the struggle, what's currently working for me, some new tools that I've discovered that are amazing that I want to share with you, and really just have a heart-to-heart with you about caffeine use. So let's dive in. Caffeine is everywhere. And some people might giggle when, you say, oh, I'm a caffeine addict and I'm trying to quit. But I want you all to get that caffeine is truly a drug. I remember as a nurse learning that caffeine given intravenously was a medicine that could actually change people's heart rate. We could give it to babies that were in respiratory failure. It was actually an IV medicine. I was like, oh, I thought it was just like my cup of Starbucks. I didn't realize I could give this via IV. And it is a sympathetic nervous stimulant, which means it causes your sympathetic nervous system to rev up. So it increases your heart rate, it constricts blood vessels, it increases adrenaline in the body. All of those things cause your heart to beat faster, your tissues to get more blood, all the activities in your body to just kind of rev up. But the problem with that is it can affect sleep. It can make you jittery. It can give you diarrhea. Okay? It can give you heart palpitations. And we all know that it has gnarly withdrawal symptoms. One of the ways we know something is addictive is because there's withdrawal symptoms. In the DSM-5, which is the diagnostic manual that psychologists and psychiatrists use to diagnose people with mental health issues, caffeine addiction and caffeine withdrawal are both listed diagnoses, okay? Now, I'm not saying that your caffeine addiction is as bad as a heroin addiction, okay? Your caffeine addiction is probably not going to kill you the way that overdosing on heroin could. Now, that said, I have heard some stories of caffeine users who are extreme caffeine users and who work themselves up to 2,000 milligrams of caffeine a day and do start to have emergent health conditions that require them going to a hospital. So it's not that you can't OD on caffeine. You definitely can. But I'd say most people are not in that area of use. So I think it's important to think about addiction versus use. I'm not here trying to tell you that you have to quit caffeine. I don't think that everyone does need to quit caffeine. I love seeing the people who can have 1 or 2 cups of coffee a day and they're just oh, it's the best part of my day. Coffee and Jesus in the morning, or wake up, drink coffee, slay. I wish I was that person. For me, caffeine is really something that I get addicted to very easily and very quickly. So there's a difference between addiction and use. When you're addicted to something, you start to have obsessive thoughts about it. You start to think about it. You anticipate when you're going to get it. You go back and forth. You're like, should I use this? Should I not use this? How can I get it? You might feel anxiety if you don't have access to it. I need to get my caffeine. You might be oh, I'm going camping, so I have to definitely make sure I have this so you don't get caught without your substance. And it can be harming your life. So typically when we are addicted to something, there's some really negative repercussions in our life. For me, what I discovered was caffeine was worsening my anxiety and depression. It was actually causing severe mood instability for me. And I didn't realize that. I was okay, it can't be the caffeine. And then I cut out the caffeine for 3 weeks and I was whoa, my mood is dramatically better. So for me, I've discovered that I'm addicted to caffeine. I freely can admit that I'm a caffeine addict and that I'm committed to being abstinent from caffeine. So this might sound a little reminiscent of like 12-step programs like Alcoholics Anonymous, and you'd be right. There is actually a Caffeine Anonymous group that I found online, and I've been going to their meetings on Zoom, and they are fantastic. Now, some of you may be laughing, like, Heather, you're going to a 12-step program for caffeine use? That's ridiculous, okay? And I totally understand the potential humor in that situation. And I will tell you that I am learning so much about myself, and that for me, caffeine really is something that I use in my life to avoid coping with negative feelings. Pretty much any drug, whether it's alcohol, heroin, pot, mushrooms. Okay, I know some of y'all are onto like the psychedelic journeys and like all that, but if you're doing something on the reg, chances are you're using it to alter your state to feel a different way, because the way that you feel without it is not actually as good as you want to feel. I'm not all about drugs, whether they're legal or illegal. I think it's really important to learn how to process your feelings and experience life sober and deal with things. And that said, I have not actually been living sober. I've been addicted to caffeine for about 13 to 14 years. My caffeine addiction and use started in 2007. So I was 26. And I was working at a job that had extreme hours. I worked 66 hours a week. I worked Monday through Friday, 9:30 a.m. to 10 p.m. And I worked 3 Saturdays out of the month from 9:30 to like 5 p.m. I literally didn't have a life except for work. Now, I knew this going into the job, and it was a kind of a special job. It was kind of like a lifestyle job. It was an opportunity for me to learn a lot. And so I took it on. It was like a calling, a mission. But about a year or so into the job, I just was hitting a wall. I was not having a good time there. I was being emotionally abused by managers. I was being screamed at, yelled at, constantly berated for not performing up to their standards. Yet they didn't fire me. If I wasn't performing well enough, they could have just fired me. But they just verbally and emotionally abused me. I was not assertive. I was scared. That was my livelihood, so I was really scared to just get up and quit a job and have to go find something new. I also felt passionate about what I did. I didn't want to leave. And so I found myself in this kind of untenable situation. And I remember, I can like still see the Starbucks on my desk. I remember I started drinking coffee in the spring of that year at work. And I never drank coffee in college. Like, I didn't drink it in my early 20s. And then all of a sudden, I realized that having coffee or caffeine every day was helping me cope with the negative feelings and experience I was having at work. Maybe you can relate. I feel like coffee is so much a part of our workplace culture in America. And I'm sure it's to cope with the fact that working a lot of 9-to-5 jobs is horrible. All right. It's unfulfilling. It's monotonous. It's boring. You work with coworkers you don't like. You sit under fluorescent lights. I mean, a little bit of coffee can be the highlight of your day. And I get that. So I was drinking yerba mate. I was getting Starbucks, and I eventually did quit that job, and I went back to school for nursing. I was doing classes at the local community college, and I was drinking instant coffee. Okay, I wasn't glamorous with my addiction, y'all. I didn't start out getting $5 lattes. I was like, where are the instant crystals that I can dissolve in my water? I would get up and study early in the morning. And then I remember drinking my coffee. I can still see myself sitting at my desk in the room I rented in a house in Venice, California, doing my chemistry homework at like 7 in the morning. And 3 of the days of the week, I worked as a nanny, and I had to be there at their house by 6:30. So that meant I was up by like 5:50, threw on some clothes, drove to their house, and they always had a pot of coffee going. Well, I got into the habit of having a cup of coffee first thing. And guess what? I didn't like that job either. The people I worked for were nasty. First of all, they were filthy. Their house was disgusting. They had pet rats, and the rats kicked litter all over the floor. I was taking care of a 9-month-old baby. I just found it to be a foul place. I remember that like she hadn't vacuumed the condo for like 9 months. And like finally I just vacuumed it. And she was like, oh, you didn't need to do that. And I wanted to be like, yeah, I did. Like I work here 3 days a week and it's disgusting. I would do all the dishes and like load their dishwasher and run it. And she's like, oh, you don't have to do that. And I'm like, yeah, I do. Like it's foul in here. So the coffee was a pleasant distraction from that job. And then I would take the little boy out for a walk. I was honestly extremely bored at that job. And I was like not stimulated mentally. Obviously, the baby like wasn't really even talking. He had a speech delay, I think. And so like he never spoke, even though I took care of him till he was like 2. He basically didn't speak. So there was very little interaction for me. I'd like read him stories and like try to play with him and take him to the park. But a lot of the times he just kind of wanted to be like in his interior world. And I would take him for walks and then I'd be like, cool, let's go to the coffee shop and I'll get an iced coffee. So I'd like have a morning coffee and like an afternoon coffee. Finished that job, moved to New York City for nursing school, and straight up was drinking coffee all the time at that point. Like I was struggling with a flare-up of chronic pain in my feet that I dealt with in my 20s. I was extremely stressed from nursing school. I was regretting my choice. I remember the first day of nursing school and being like, oh, I don't think this is the right fit. But it was like, too late now. Like, you're doing this. And I started getting Starbucks. And I remember I'd leave clinical at like 3 p.m. and I would just be like craving Starbucks. And I would go get 2 shots of espresso. And then I'd actually come home and like heat up my own almond milk. And like, I also cheap. So it's cheaper to get 2 shots of espresso than a latte. You save like $3. So then I'd come home, heat up my own almond milk, pour it in there. Oh, and I'd get a glazed donut from Starbucks. That was like their glazed like cake donut. Oh my God, they're so good. And I'd have my coffee and my glazed donut at 3 p.m. And then I'd work on studying and homework and all the stuff I had to do for nursing school. And I was just in a vicious cycle with coffee, y'all. It was my way of coping with negative feelings. I was doing things in New York that I wasn't proud of. I was using alcohol a lot. I was drinking a lot. I was hooking up with men who weren't right for me. I was angry. I was having angry outbursts at people. I was not in a good place. I was stressed. So coffee was the thing that made me feel good. And moved to Austin, got a nursing job, and hooked back on coffee. Not hooked, but I just kept it going. And I wasn't super happy being a nurse either. I was like, you can see this pattern for me of like not being in jobs where I'm happy, right? And I think that's the thing that addiction points us to is like patterns in our life. Like something's not working, Heather. You're still in jobs that you're not passionate about, you're not loving. And I was totally hooked on coffee as a nurse. My first job, I would go at lunch. So I'd have to be there at 7 because it was surgery. I'd go to lunch between like 11 and 12 every day. I had an hour for lunch. So I'd go to Starbucks. I'd get a coffee. I'd drink it in my car. It was like my little joy, right? It was something I looked forward to because I wasn't enjoying my job. And then I moved to the hospital and it was the same thing. I worked in a super boring triage job where I just sat at a desk all day, basically by myself. I brought books to work because it was so slow in the area I worked in. And every morning at 9:30, I'd go to the coffee kiosk and get a baked good and an iced coffee. And that was like my thing that I looked forward to help pass the time. And then I got down to the ER and that was much busier. Finally, I was in a job where I was mentally stimulated. There was lots to learn. There was a lot going on, but my stress was super high. And so now I'm like drinking coffee, I think to cope with the negative feeling of stress. And I'd hit Starbucks every day on the way to work. I'd get iced espresso or 2 shots of espresso. Sometimes I'd just do 2 shots of espresso in a glass, no ice. I'd bring it to work and I'd refrigerate it for 3 hours. And then I'd have it at noon. I'm not a person who likes to drink coffee first thing in the morning. I'm like an 11 to 1 p.m. coffee person. And I just consumed lots of coffee. I would drink diet sodas, Diet Coke, and I would even drink the horrible hospital coffee that was in the ER. I would drink that. Sometimes I would take a cup and I'd refrigerate it and then I'd make my own iced coffee concoction in the ER. I'd use the ice machine, put my coffee in, my chilled coffee, and then I'd put 2 half and half creamers and a sugar or a Splenda thing that we had down there. It was gross. But when you're an addict, you don't really care the delivery system. You just want the hit. And then I started my own business and I was just in caffeine, right? It was just what I did. It's what I drank. And, I didn't realize that even though I absolutely love what I do now and love having my own business and I'm super passionate about it, I didn't realize that I hadn't learned how to cope with negative feelings very well because I've been using caffeine for over 10 years. So it was my coping mechanism for boredom, loneliness, isolation, tedium, fatigue. But honestly, it was a mood boost. It was if I didn't feel like I had something fun to look forward to, coffee was my thing. And I went to Kauai and hoped that the tropical air and just the beauty of the place would just cure me of my caffeine addiction. And it didn't. It got worse almost. I was going to the coffee shop every day to get my coffee. I was, making coffee at home and got back to Oregon and was still struggling with it. Then when I moved back to Austin just this spring, I went on a 2-week bender with caffeine. And then I was not feeling well at all. And that's when I was okay, something's got to change. And I hope you can hear yourself in my story and that it's relatable to you. I found these Caffeine Anonymous meetings and I've been going 2 to 3 times a week, and they're on Zoom and they're amazing. I finally feel like I found my people, the other productive, ambitious people who have just been addicted to this substance. In the meetings, what I'm starting to learn is that I'm powerless over caffeine. I have to turn it over to my higher power, which is God. And I have to just understand that I am weak and helpless around this substance. I've also had to come to the realization that I have resentments against people and that I have negative feelings that I have to learn how to deal with. And I have sadness and grief and all kinds of feelings and regret. It's almost like the year that I started using caffeine, I stopped growing emotionally in certain ways, if that makes sense, because I stopped processing feelings. I stopped dealing with life. Now, you might look at me from the outside and be like, Heather, you're dealing with life. You're coping great. And you'd be right in many ways. Obviously, I'm not in a gutter somewhere. I haven't had to go to rehab. My life is very functional. But my internal life, I have struggles. I have emotional struggles. And I'm the first to admit that to y'all and say, hey, I'm a real human and I struggle too. So my journey now is really okay, how do I learn to process negative feelings? So the first week that I was off caffeine with Caffeine Anonymous, I did pretty good. I actually felt pretty almost arrogant. I was I've got this. This is so easy. This is a breeze. I actually didn't go through withdrawal symptoms like headaches because my use was reduced. I was only maybe having 60 to 80 milligrams a day. So it wasn't dramatic, but it was still affecting me. But then the next week I was okay, I'm not going to have decaf. And that actually was a really hard week for me. And what I've discovered is that decaf still has some caffeine in it. And it's really hard to quit a substance if you're still putting a degree of it in your body, which I'm still coming to grips with because chocolate has caffeine and I'm not quite ready to give up chocolate. That said, I'm not using chocolate in a compulsive way where I am with coffee. So the week without decaf, I had a lot of negative feelings come up. I had sadness and regret and loneliness and just all kinds of feelings. And what I had to do was call a friend from my Caffeine Anonymous meeting and just chat and talk. And it was amazing how just being able to talk to somebody could make such a huge difference in my journey. Just processing my feelings and being I want to drink caffeine. Well, okay, what's going on? Well, I'm feeling just rotten and lonely today, or I'm feeling grief, or I'm feeling strange. I feel disoriented. I want to go to the thing that brings me comfort and routine and normalcy. And one of the things I'm discovering about negative feelings is they don't last that long. It even happened to me this morning. I was having some weird feelings and they don't last that long. They actually pass. I love a quote I saw recently, which is feelings are a visitor to your house. They're not a permanent resident. So I'm learning how to feel the feelings and then they pass through me. And I've been feeling some deep senses of contentment and peace and healing and growth and evolution because I think I'm finally allowing myself to really feel and process feelings. Instead of constantly pushing myself to be productive, I'm like, no, I'm actually going to rest now. Or this is all the work I have in me this week. Or I can't do more this week. Like, this is my max. Like, nope, I actually don't want to go to that event tonight. I want to stay home on my couch. And this is hard for me because I have a belief that the more productive I am, the more worthy I am. This is something that someone in my Caffeine Anonymous meeting shared, and I was like, whoa, that's me. That's me too. So I'm having to untangle that belief that my productivity is not matched to my worth. Maybe you feel that way. If you're an American, you probably have some of that belief tucked inside you. But it's important that we disentangle that belief if we're going to free ourselves from addiction to anything, whether it's caffeine, food, alcohol, shopping, recreational drugs, gambling, porn, all the things. Okay? I want to share a couple other little tidbits with you. So the first is that relapse is part of recovery. So for me, I feel like if I have a decaf, I've kind of relapsed a little bit, which is kind of cool because in the past it was like if I had real coffee, I relapsed. But I'm making progress. I'm having less and less decaf. And, if you have been caffeine free and then you drink it again, it's not the end of the world. Okay? It's an opportunity for you to pick yourself back up and get back on the horse. And just remember, relapse is part of recovery. You have to keep going. You have to try again. And I really invite you to see it as a spiritual journey where you really need to reach out to God. Maybe you don't believe in God, or maybe you're not sure, or maybe you definitely do. And in the 12-step programs, you can turn it over to your higher power, however you understand that. For me, I have found that belief in God is really essential to my recovery because when you are addicted to something in life, whether it's romance, shopping, TV, caffeine, sugar, food, you are idolizing something in your life greater than God. And God is the only thing that's worthy of our worship. God is the only thing that should be in the number one place in our life. God should be before your relationships, your romantic relationships, your family, your children, all those things. I truly believe that. And if you don't have God in the right priority list, you will struggle, you will falter. And I see my addiction as like a spiritual disease where I have not been prioritizing my relationship with God. And I've struggled in my relationship with God over the past 5 years after coming to faith in like 2013. And I'll be sharing more about my spiritual journey with y'all. I haven't really talked much about it because I wasn't like actively pursuing my relationship with God. But luckily, God is always pursuing me. And he's just so good that he's always coming after me and pulling me back to him. So look at your addiction and your addictive tendencies as, how's my relationship with the world beyond, with my creator, where I came from? You didn't come from nothing. You didn't come from nowhere. Another little thing I want to give you is taquino. Who knows about taquino? It is a coffee substitute. It's made from like carob and chicory root and I don't know, some kind of witch's blend. And what I love about taquino is it's tea bags and it steeps and creates the body of like coffee. So I love herbal tea. I've been drinking a lot of herbal tea. But it's watery, right? It's clear. It's a different energy. And sometimes I want that thickness and that body that coffee gives me. And so the taquino is a great substitute because it's very rich, it's dark, it's got that kind of slightly bitter flavor. And then you can put like some non-dairy creamer in it. You can make an iced taquino and put it over ice with some almond milk, have a little latte vibe. And it's honestly been really good for me if I'm craving coffee to have that because one of the things I miss is the ritual. I still miss the ritual of going to a coffee shop, which is sometimes why I'm still getting a decaf here or there. But I will say that the decaf is not as pleasurable to me and that the ritual is starting to lessen its hold on me. I really hope this episode helped you. I wanted to be honest where I'm at in my journey and really share with you, what's been going on and give you some tips that hopefully will help you. Just remember, you're not alone in this addiction. It's extremely common. Remember that caffeine is an addictive substance. It changes your brain chemistry. So it can actually take not just weeks, but months to fully recover from the addiction. It's a lifelong journey. It's one day at a time. It's always going to probably pull at you, but there is something really amazing available on the other side of caffeine addiction, which is peace, serenity, contentment, joy, focus, being present. All things that I miss out on when I am on caffeine and running faster than my body can keep up and leading to health issues and mental instability and just not good stuff. So I really hope this episode helped you. Please reach out on Instagram at Heather McConaughey. Say hi to me. Let me know if you found this episode helpful. What was your biggest takeaway? Please share with me. I'd love to hear that. And I will talk to you next week. As a reminder, applications are now open for Empower, my 12-week coaching program. We're calling this one the Summer Glow Up. So if you're ready to glow up, girl, then this is for you. There's only a couple weeks to apply. Applications are closing in just a couple of weeks. So make sure you go over to my website at heathermcconaughey.com/empower to learn more about the program and to apply.